welcome to another edition of the Bird Calls. I'm your host, David Grubb, and looking at the ceiling and joining me is Oleh Cosell.
Trying to get the lighting right.
We got to make sure, yes, we got to look good. Got to look good for the people. And thank you for watching previous episodes. We're really excited to see the subscriptions go up and people checking in and leaving your comments. So please continue to do so. Share the podcast. Of course, you can get it wherever you listen to your podcast as well, but of course right here on YouTube, and we'd love for you to keep checking in with us as we continue to bring you great content. The big story this week, of course, is the release of the NBA postseason awards as we start getting deeper and deeper into that. And yesterday was the All-NBA's all-defensive team, and Herb Jones was conspicuously left off the list. I don't think, Ollie, that anyone in New Orleans presumed that less than a second team was possible for Herb when this regular season concluded. I mean, I think we all assumed it might be tough to get first team because it's the NBA, but second team seemed like a lock. For Herb to end up where he did with only 15 votes was just surprising. And I just want to get first your thoughts on that, Ollie, and just Herb not making the team.
It really surprised me. Because, David, first of all, he had a rookie season to where he got a lot of accolade for his defense, to where people like Zach Lowe and I know others were basically, standing for him to get one of these, either the first or second all-defensive team awards. And so he already kind of came in, even though he was a rookie last season, he already had somewhat of a rep. And then the bigger thing, of course, will always be to me, what do your peers think of you, right? Your play. For years, Drew Holiday here was highly regarded for his defensive exploits, but he hardly ever got any kind of, acclaim for it. It's because of one reason alone. The team never really won enough, right? For where it would, you can overcome, maybe some obscurity of being in a small market, not having such a name. So there's a lot of factors that always work kind of against New Orleans players, especially, like I said, if you're a quiet type. Right? Look at the lists of the guys that made it. There's a lot of outspoken guys on there, right? Guys that play with an edge. And Herb Jones really doesn't. So, yeah, in a roundabout way, I guess I'm probably talking myself into understanding why Herb didn't make it. But I'm with you. I can't name on one hand, honestly, 5 better defenders than Herb this season. When you take everything in account, versatility, right? Being able to guard 1 through 5. He can't guard every center, but he can guard some centers on some possessions. Number 2, it's that determination. He doesn't take a trip off, a possession off. I've seen some of these other guys on this list, they have. And lastly, with Herb, it's just, I don't know how to put it, but he has this knack of whether you need a deflection, whether you need a charge, a steal, a block on a perimeter, right? He can do it all. Right. So it's not like there's any kind of weaknesses, right, or holes in his defensive game. So I honestly don't understand it. But I'll tell you what, I bet you he's going to win multiple times in the future. It's just a shame he didn't get his first one this year.
Yeah, I think no one should be happy with the outcome. But I think that there are 2 types of sins. There are sins of commission and sins of omission. And this to me was a sin of omission, where it was not malicious to leave Herb off of this list, but it was a lack of awareness by the voters in this situation. Because Herb is in some really good company of people who got left off. Mm-hmm. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. 2 of his teammates make the first team. Giannis doesn't. Okay, you know what I mean? Anthony Davis, who has probably been the best post defender in the entire playoffs and has really led the charge for the Lakers, he doesn't make it. And people talked all year. AD had played some of the best defense of his career this season. So Jimmy Butler, first team All-NBA, doesn't make the all-defensive team. And no one would dispute that Jimmy Butler is an elite defender in this league. Mm-hmm. So I think the snub team, you take the top 5 snubs, and you've got as good as a team as I think is the NBA's all-first team, defensive team.
Yeah, definitely better than the second. That's what I said in our group chat. But yeah, you're right. There's an argument to be made for the first one.
Look at if you got Herb, Jimmy Butler as your guards.
Yeah, and then you got Bridges and Smart also.
And then you take Mikal Bridges. No, you take Mikal Bridges, Giannis, and AD as your front court.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Give me that. I think that's as good as the first team.
Yeah, and David, I guess this is what you know what this is leading to. Answer me this: why isn't there a third all defensive team? All NBA's had three teams since 1988. Why hasn't there been a move? Because the All NBA team, right, picked up a third. Why hasn't that happened with defensive teams when supposedly, defense is very important? We're trying to put more notoriety. And when I say by we, the media, the NBA itself is trying to, put more merit into that side of the ball. Why hasn't there been a third team created yet?
It doesn't make sense because when you look at it from 1988, we've had two expansions in the NBA since then. So you've added more players to the pool, and defensive versatility has become, as you said, much, much more of an asset. We have the Hustle Award. We've added these things to the league. We track hustle stats in general every night on your scoreboard. When you're at an arena, you know what your team is doing defensively in that regard. And we're continuing to add these metrics to the scale, defensive real plus minus, all these things that we're trying to get these advanced stats, which is really hard to do with individual defense. But at the same time, yeah, it feels like the NBA needs to expand this because I don't see what's the negative in adding a third team. You have three all NBA teams. I get it with rookies because rookies are harder and harder to make an impact first season. But with defense, and as you said, in this offensive era where individual defenders are as good as gold, having a Herb Jones on your roster makes an average Pelicans defensive group the sixth best defense in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like, so you look at those types of factors. If defense is this important, and we talk about the value of the two-way player and the elite two-way player, then yeah, I think that level of recognition, it's better for the teams. It's better for the players because it leads to more financial resources. And then agents love it and fans love it. I don't see what the downside would be.
Yeah, there isn't one. So again, I've never even really heard talk, right, of let's add a third team, right? Why hasn't it happened? There's 470 some odd NBA players, and there's a lot of guys that are deserving, as you mentioned. And it's easy if you look at the top 10 that got nominated this year. Yeah, we could pick apart maybe some of the arguments for several players, like Caruso's on there. A lot of people had Dylan Brooks, issues with him.
I think
I'd
Dylan
rather
Brooks
not do that, right?
Brooks and Derek White are probably the ones that I think most.
Derek White's a bench player, for crying out loud. Right. I mean, and I don't think he's the best defender on that Boston team. Do you? I think Jaylen Brown is.
And I mean, Jason Tatum has a higher defensive real plus minus than Derek White does, as does Jaylen Brown. And Marcus Smart, who also didn't make the team.
Right. Excuse me. I should have said Marcus Smart first.
Yes, but yeah. Derek White makes it, and three other Celtics don't. And that to me is, and I'd even say Robert Williams at his best is a better defender than Derek White.
Yeah, like I said, so we could poke holes, right, in several of the ones that did receive an award this year, but I'd rather not do that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of guys that are deserving. I mean, I'm really shocked. You mentioned Jimmy Butler, right, not making it. I had tossed out there Mikal Bridges. I mean, just because he went to Brooklyn in the trade, I don't think his defense lessened any. And remember, he played for most of the season with Phoenix. And I don't think, honestly, there's a better on-ball defender than Herb. Then maybe at times it is Bridges for me. It's not Anunoby. It's not Smart. It's Bridges. So, I haven't even said Lou Dort. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there, David. Yeah. I don't understand why there's no third team.
Well, I think it's time. I just think it's time to do it. And I think for the other part of it is when you look at, those groups, those other factors, like we talked about, when you can explain it, yeah, time in the league does matter. And we talked about in the article that's on the Bird Rights right now about analyzing this a bit, inexperience. There's only one player on that team who's in his third year or less. And we've only seen that very rarely over the years, very young players making the team. I mean, it's hard to get on there before your third year in the league. It just doesn't happen very often. And then on top of that, teams who don't make the playoffs. In the last 5 years, only 3 players on teams who didn't make the playoffs have made the all-defensive team. So as you talked about at the top, your team does have an influence on that. The Pelicans held Herb back to an extent because I think the team's overall reputation, regardless of what the standings said defensively, them being sixth, the overall reputation of the franchise blowing some games that it shouldn't have blown in high-profile situations, I think that sticks with voters who don't have every minute to watch every player in every game. I like you. I think the Pelicans get better. You're in the playoffs next year. You're doing what you're supposed to do as a team. I think once Herb gets on, he's going to be one of those guys who's an annual guy. And I think it's going to be impossible to get him off because, as you said, he's got the respect of the coaches already. He's got the respect of the players. He's got the respect of the announcers. He's got the respect of his teammates. It's just winning over the media. And that takes a little bit longer when you're an undrafted, your second round pick who comes on a team that has not had a ton of team success.
Yeah, most of the people with votes, they usually just follow, if not just one team, just maybe several teams, right? I mean, that's what you learn. A lot of these voters are beat writers that follow, right, the actual teams. Or if there's national guys, well, they're going to pick and choose on who they watch. And if you're not a playoff team, boy, that really does hurt, right? You're not all of a sudden on the prime time, broadcasts. I mean, how many times did the Pelicans this season have a game taken off, whether it was ESPN or TNT, right? So, yeah, all those things, they go against Herb. But as you mentioned, I don't think that's going to keep happening in the future. Once he gets in, he's going to stay there for a while, especially, right, David? If the Pelicans stay a top 10 defensive team, I mean, they were 6th. They should have gotten somebody in there on that fact alone. I think Larry Nance, right? He tweeted that out. JJ Redick argued about that today on, what was it, First Take or whatever show he was on. So a lot of people that do know about Herb Jones absolutely know he's a top 10 guy, but not enough do. That'll change.
I think it will change. And I think, people who worry about Herb, let the other guys can be mad for Herb. Larry Nance can be upset, Trey, all the franchise. You'll never hear a word out of Herb Jones because Herb is the most, in my mind, the most self-motivated player on the Pelicans roster. He's the guy that you go back and you look at when he played at Alabama with a broken hand and plays an entire game with a broken hand, still gets double-digit rebounds, makes free throws, all these types of things. Mentally, I think Herb is the guy. He knows who he is as a basketball player more than any other person. He's most self-assured and comfortable in his skin of any of the young guys. I think, Larry, CJ, they're established. But if this young group, BI and below, as far as age goes, none of them are as confident and as self-assured in my mind, watching the way that they go about their business as Herb Jones is.
Yeah, that's a good argument. Herb Jones never seeks the limelight. That's the biggest thing I've noticed. He is fantastic talking off camera. He likes talking to us when there's not a camera in his face. But when he's asked to go do podium, he always kind of rolls the eyes, the head, kind of slumps his shoulders, probably wishes he could figure out a way to get out of it. That's kind of who he is. He doesn't need any attention. I mean, after every big game he's had, that we've had him on the podium when he scored, say 18, 20 points, he never wants to talk about that. Ever, never, ever. And so that to me instantly showed me who he was. And then you're right. He's the most self-motivated guy because guess who I've seen put in more hours in the gym when media's been allowed in there? It's been Herb. I will say he probably gets a run from his money, right? From maybe Jose Alvarado. He's another guy who I think really doesn't care about any of those extracurricular things as long as he has secured his job in the NBA, right? Mm-hmm. It was tenuous for him more so than Herb.
Yeah, I think there's a little more desperation on Jose's part.
Yeah, but once Jose landed that contract with the Pelicans, was no longer a two-way player. He felt more at ease, and he's always been hyping everybody else, and that's who Herb is. You watch him on the bench, he's always getting excited about whether Trey Murphy gets a dunk or hits a three or somebody else doing something, never about what Herb's done himself.
And his poise, those times against the Warriors, in these big games where guys were trying to needle Herb against the Suns, all these things, you don't get under his skin. You don't see him buying into any antics. He never claps when something's good. Herb just goes about his business. So I think this offseason, he was already motivated to come back, be a better scorer, be a better passer. The things we saw him do the last 20 games of the season, he's going to come back. And we talked about this in the last episode about his shooting down the stretch. I think those things help too. You get yourself to be a more valuable offensive player as well. It's weird that's the way it works in the NBA, but it just does. If you're taking on a bigger scoring load, they respect your defensive effort a little bit more, unless you are putting up league-leading stats as a big man, a Ben Wallace, Dwight Howard type. Herb's never going to lead the league in a category, maybe outside of steals. He could be a league leader in steals maybe. But other than that, it's just the versatility of his numbers, that he draws them from everywhere. One of 5 guys, as I noted in the article, 40 blocks, 200 rebounds, 250 rebounds, and 100 steals. That versatility of his defense and him finishing top 5 in the hustle stats, it just shows you, I think, his star is rising.
It is. If he gets that jumper to start going down with more regularity throughout a season, he's going to become a heck of a valuable player. Not that he isn't already, but it's going to raise him a tier or two. But so I got to mention this. You remind me of that Golden State Warriors game. Draymond Green, right? Tried to do everything he could to get under Herb's skin, even kicked him in the back of the head. But when it came time for Draymond, who was still yelling at Herb, during a play out of bounds, right, coming out of a timeout. Herb's just pointing out to him, hey, Steve Kerr's calling you to the bench. You're out of here. It was just a way how casually Herb said it to him that showed you everything you need to know. Nobody's going to break him out there, right? Mentally, nobody. He's just that strong.
He won't even take, he's old school in that regard that we see him get knocked down on plays and opponents go to reach for his hand. He will not take an opponent's hand. He waits for his teammates to lift him up. He will not, Herb is in the zone.
Doing that in his rookie season. Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think mentally, I just love where he is. And I don't think this bothers him in the least. I don't think it motivates him because he's motivated already. Herb wants to be the best.
He's told us it doesn't motivate him. Yeah.
I want to finish.
Sorry, David, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, just reminded me of that. This does not motivate him one bit. He just wants to be the best player he can and to be a good teammate. Those are the only two things he really cares about.
I want to finish up on the awards before we move on, because I think overall now the NBA, as the debate about awards has gotten bigger and deeper every year. And we just talked about how the league has expanded, and it's probably going to expand again in the near future. I think that there's going to have to come a point with all these additions, the midseason tournaments and stuff, we're going to have to rethink how these awards are given. And you talked about potentially doing some half-season awards. Mm-hmm. I think also, too, another possibility could be having conference awards, an all-conference team, and then having an all-NBA team and giving some more recognition, because we can't have a bigger all-star game unless we start doing 2 all-star games, a mid-season all-star game and a postseason all-star game or something. Right. But the best way I think to do it is to start recognizing more of these individual players akin to what the NFL and Major League Baseball do.
Yeah, I absolutely love that argument. As I mentioned, there's 450, 470 players, and not everybody gets through a full season anymore. So maybe dividing it up into having something after the first half, not all the awards, but having some kind of, acclaim for maybe just the top, things that players do, like whether it's kind of all NBA-ish or some kind of top defensive award. I think that does make sense. Same thing with conferences, right? What happens in years when, conference can be top heavy at times, right? It really kind of still hurts some players that probably deserve recognition in my book, but because they're stuck on kind of a mediocre team, well, they don't naturally get it. Right? Because usually, let's face it, once you get an award, especially if it's like an all-NBA thing, all of a sudden you've established a certain level to where even if your play drops off, voters remember you, right? They can always go back to you. And especially if you just have a good game or two that they watched, right? So suddenly you're not getting all the potential players that may deserve a vote, especially, like I said, if things start getting a little bit out of whack, whether conference is too heavy. Some teams are winning more than others, and the ones that aren't winning, they still have great players, but because of whether it's because of injuries or whatever reason, they don't get that notoriety and then they miss out, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I like that argument a lot.
And these things are tied to people's salaries too. And
I was going to bring that up, yeah.
So I think a lot of guys, it would help, and I think it changes the dynamic where teams can reward you in a different way. I know you probably can make an all-conference team even if you don't make an all-NBA, and that creates a different tier where guys it's not an all or nothing. Because I think there are a lot of guys who would make all conference teams. Because, I mean, look at a college. A college conference has roughly 12 teams, right? And you have 2 or 3 teams within those conferences, first, second, and third. So we're talking about an NBA that's 15 teams per conference right now. I think you could make it work. You could, at the very least, if you wanted to do it, you could just take 5 guys from each division and have all division teams. And that might, there are a number of ways to think about it, I think, just in ways that could be more inclusive without watering down the awards. Because if you just had an all division award for this year, there's no doubt Brandon Ingram, gets recognized. You think about that division team, it's SGA. We're talking about Brandon Ingram. We're talking about Herb Jones, maybe. There's a most improved player in your division. Trey Murphy can get that. I think that it incentivizes rookies a little more. Who's the best rookie in your division? Those types of things. I think it creates more engagement for the NBA without watering things down.
No, those are all good arguments, and I'm in agreement with you. And I'm glad you mentioned they could potentially be tied to salary, because you're absolutely right. With how contracts can be structured, and I'll be very curious, right? Herb Jones's next contract, his second one, once he's done with this rookie one, will it have any kind of additional incentives for whether winning, maybe like saying getting on a defensive all-NBA team? I know Drew Holiday's had that. I think Jaylen Brown, there's other players. So for Herb, then all of a sudden you do have an incentive, right? So then think about this psychologically. Then all of a sudden, if Herb knows it's tied to his bank account, all of a sudden, do you think he's campaigning for himself more? Does that make him more of a vocal type of leader on the court? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here because I wasn't expecting to go that route. But going back to your original point, David, everybody loves awards.
Mhm.
There's not enough of them to be handed out.
And I just, as long as it doesn't cheapen the major ones, and I don't think it does, because you wouldn't treat them the same. An all division award, an all conference award, fine. I think it just, and I think for owners, the benefit is, where you see guys get first team and it jumps up to a max. If you're an owner and it's no longer an all or nothing with a player, because I think that can be a point of contention and negotiation. If I feel like I'm in a conference, I'm looking at my team and I know we may have a good team, but there's a logjam in my position. And I'll never make an all NBA because I play small forward where there's Kevin Durant and LeBron James. But if there's an all division team, an all conference team, there's a lower level that I can still get into. It makes sense that incentive is actually reachable instead of something that's just on a piece of paper that I know I've got to put up something phenomenal to overcome not only the statistical problem, but the name recognition problem.
I didn't even think of that one. I love that one, actually, because you're right. Think about a player that maybe gets to one all-star game. More times than not, like CJ McCollum. There you go. He's never made an all-star game, never an all-NBA team. But yeah, he's a guy that's been good enough to carry his team when he's playing well. We saw it with Portland multiple years. We saw it with the Pelicans this season, right? He had that, 7-8 week stretch after he came back from COVID and before he hurt his finger. He was on fire, David. He was scoring at will, right, between 30, 40 points and giving the Pels a legitimate chance to win, even though I know that a lot of those games occurred during, of course, that bad 10 and 25 start. But still, CJ McCollum was playing like a top 25, top 30 player where we were all saying, hey, he might deserve an all-star bid just because of that.
I mean, I think it just works. When going back to Herb's contract, he's not a free agent. He's still got 2 years on his deal, I think, right? Or is it 1 year left? 1 year left on his deal, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 1 year,
like
$1.7 million.
Yeah. He'll be a restricted free agent next year.
Do the Pelicans, clearly his value is going to skyrocket if he hits the open market.
Teams he won't hit the open market. He'll be a restricted free agent, but you're right. Somebody could place a crazy bid and the Pelicans would be forced
poison pill.
Yeah.
How urgent and what strategically do you think? I mean, do you think the Pelicans, he has to be a priority for them because A, he's durable, B, he's your best defender, bar none. He's young. He checks all the boxes of what you want. So to me, they can't afford to lose him. And I think the price only goes up the longer they wait.
No, I'm hoping that he does sign something this offseason for yet another reason. What if he goes on and has that type of shooting year that I think, probably you think, he's capable of, right? None of this 32, 33%, maybe a good month or two from behind the arc. No, I'm talking about maybe shooting 36% for the season from three-point range. He does something like that. All of a sudden, you've got to be thinking, what's he going to cost? Maybe $20 million a year? So see if you can sign him now to, I don't know, I haven't really thought about too much, but I think something in the $12 to $15 million range per year, offering him 4 years, something along those lines. I think that would be very alluring to somebody like him, and he could potentially sign it. Because think about this: what if that shooting doesn't come around? What if injury strikes? Then all of a sudden he's not going to be looking at that kind of value, I think, next summer, right? So I know that would make him think long and hard this offseason, right? In a couple months' time.
And I think, it's also interesting too, because when you look at Herb, what if he makes an offensive jump like a Mikal Bridges? What if he makes an offensive jump like an OG Anunoby, where you can count on him to give you 16 to 17 points a night? If Herb's giving you that on this team offensively, man, he becomes, if he's giving you 17 points, 6 boards, 2 steals, a block, and 3 or 4 assists, because we saw him take on a lot more secondary playmaker roles as the season went on. If this offense starts put the ball in his hands as he's moving a bit more, Herb becomes a really important player. He becomes, quite frankly, like a perimeter Draymond Green for the Pelicans, except a better shooter.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I could see him ever hitting 17, right? Not if
No, I mean,
CJBI,
obviously
Zion.
with this lineup, it'd be really hard for
But
him.
yeah,
But you know what I mean? That kind of
but
guy.
everything, yeah. On when those guys are missing, and he could do that and do that regularly. Because I think we saw it enough of the last 2 seasons where if he looks for his shot, he now knows he doesn't have to settle for an open shot. He now takes it to the rim. It used to only come in transition, right, where he'd really look for his drives. No, I've seen his game honestly expand a lot since he first put on a uniform. And taking that next step where you have that confidence of looking to attack when either shot clock's coming down, you see something, you got the mismatch. No, I think that's all within his realm. Because look, I think he's a better ball handler than Jaylen Brown. I'll put that out there right now. I don't think Jaylen Brown's a very good ball handler. I think Herb doesn't get enough recognition for what he can do because he often doesn't go to his tool chest, right? But think about David, the big games he's had. For instance, against the Nuggets, I think he had one against the Cavaliers, and that's when they were missing largely all of their stars. And look at some of those stat lines. I feel like he could do that on a more regular basis on a team that would allow that opportunity for him because the Pelicans don't have that.
And it's going to be interesting to see how they manage his minutes this year. If Zion can stay on the floor, if BI can stay on the floor, it's going to be very interesting how they manage everybody's minutes in that backcourt. But I think I'd rather have that problem. I'd rather have a good problem of saying, how do I play everybody than where the hell is everybody, which has been for the Pelicans for far too long. We still haven't really gotten word on the Pelicans interviewing anybody for an assistant position to join Willie Green's staff. We've kind of talked about, what type of coaches we'd like to see, but teams are now starting to do their interview process for their head coaching jobs that are vacant. The Pelicans need to identify somebody before the good names are gone.
Yeah, I think they probably have a list, right? And my guess is they probably talk to most of them, especially teams that aren't currently playing in the playoffs. So, for instance, like James Borrego. I love that his name got mentioned, right? People need to understand that not only was he a coach under Monty for several seasons, but get this, Willie Green played his lone season here in New Orleans. James Borrego was on the sidelines. And there's about a 4-year age difference between them. So I honestly, when I first heard that rumor, I got really excited. And then I started digging deeper, David. And I think we talked a little bit about it on the last podcast. I love what James Borrego's teams in Charlotte, those 4 years with the Hornets, what they were able to do in clutch minutes. Overall, he didn't have a winning percentage as head coach in Charlotte. But when the games went down to clutch time, guess what? He did, right? So his teams overachieved in key big moments. That's huge, right? So I feel like anybody that adds offensively, adds something to closing out games better, is so, it's desperately needed. I'm not going to mince words here.
And what he had to work with,
his caliber.
The two situations he had in Charlotte and Orlando, what he had to work with the front offices there, they were trying to figure out what they wanted, which players they didn't. Neither team had a franchise player, and he was caught in. Look, Charlotte, we know what kind of situation that's been for head coaches. We talk about a team that hired a coach, lost a coach, had to rehire its old coach that it had already fired last year. That's a mess. Orlando has been a mess for 15 years outside of the Dwight Howard era. So it's. I don't think anybody should be punishing him because you're not asking him to be the head coach. And I don't think you're asking him to be the coach in waiting, because even if you were going to get rid of Willie, the next move is not going to be for somebody who has a losing reputation. The Pelicans can't do that. So I don't think it's a threat. I don't think it's a problem for anybody who's looking at him as saying he's a negative. You're not going to get somebody who's, as an assistant right now, who has a great record of winning, unless maybe Kenny Atkinson misses out on this round again and is looking for a job.
No, I'm with you. I'm glad you mentioned that. Anybody that wants and hopes for an Alvin Gentry type or Mike D'Antoni type, somebody that is been long revered for their offensive mind, is not going to come to this bench, right? So you really left that not like dropping down a tier, because that's not fair, right? Because they don't have the recognition,
right?
Because there's a lot of good minds out there, right?
It's just the name. So, you're not going to get the big name.
Yeah, right. So I'm very curious who's going to be available. I mean, all is going to depend really just with these second round of the playoffs, right? Who drops out a little bit early? Who's going to be looking, right, for maybe a new job? I mean, we just saw Coach Bud get fired with Milwaukee. Now suddenly it looks like Charles Lee, who was his number 2 up there for a lot of years, he's again a prime candidate to get a head coaching position, right? Whether with Toronto, maybe Detroit. So all of a sudden that's created a lot of openings, and there's going to be a lot of movement. I'll be curious who the Pelicans end up with, especially, right? What if they lose Jaron Collins? I hope they don't lose him because I know he's a very sharp, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Good
And he's
guy.
the only guy that Willie's hired.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
part, and I think, that the Willie's desire to connect, that's who his whole career is based on, is his relationships. He has to have someone he trusts next to him.
No doubt. I mean, you have to have a coach choose the guys that he wants to, and in key moments, feels like he can rely upon them, right? It's not a forced thing, right? It has to be natural relationships to where you hired them because you know and think that's going to be there, right? So, no, I'm with you. I don't know what other names. I'm trying to think who else is maybe in Phoenix Suns bench next to Monty that maybe, Willie Green could maybe pull away from there, maybe from Golden State, right? What if they blow it up over there? I mean, I'm not saying Steve Kerr's coming, but think about all those assistants. Maybe they could become available if they're trying to kind of a quick rebuild around Steph. So, yeah, it'll be real interesting to see.
Yeah. Ollie, I know you've got a couple more pieces coming out this week. Why don't you tell folks what you'll be looking at there, and what you're looking forward to in the next couple of days?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to get one up, one more article tomorrow that's really my last look at weaknesses. And it's probably a topic that I think anybody could guess. And that's, of course, rim deterrence. The Pelicans have not done a good job of dissuading shots near the rim in both seasons under Willie Green. And it's not his fault. He hasn't had the personnel to do a better job there. So I'm taking an in-depth look, like I said, with that tomorrow.
I'm trying to think, because we know Willie Hernangomez won't be around next year.
Well, he's got a team option, right? At like
I don't think he wants to come.
No, here's the thing. Yeah, if I'm the Pelicans and you feel like he's not, and let's face it, he could barely get time ahead of Jackson when Jackson didn't deserve run this year, right? So you've got to think that mutually, that both teams, both parties are going to want to separate ways. Yeah, for sure, David.
So you look at the front court, and it's Jonas, and it's Larry, and it's Trey. And I think Trey can actually be a better low post defender with that athleticism. I think he has a Robert Horry type build, but I don't think he has those instincts. Horry was people forget Robert Horry left the SEC as the second leading shot blocker in conference history behind Shaq. The second leading shot blocker in SEC history behind Shaq. That was Robert Horry. But Trey, I think, has potential to become a better defender. I think he's willing to do that. And with his length, we saw him block some shots in the trail position as the season went on. He got a little bit more aggressive defensively. I think his length can be part of that. But we know, whether it's in the draft or through free agency or trade, they've got to get longer and more athletic up front. Until they do that, nothing gets better.
Yeah. In addition to the rim deterrence, you worry about rebounding. Because I know I'm with you. I think Trey, because of his tenacity, his ability to soak in information, and just his athleticism, he's got the potential to become a much better rebounder once he puts on some more strength, right? He needs more weight on him. But he's also a guy that I know watches game film. So he's going to learn, more of the fundamentals on where to be. Because when you watch him, even down this last 6 weeks, I still saw him often out of position, whether it's guarding your own man or being in the right spots defensively for, to offer help. So Trey honestly still has a ways to come on the defensive side, even though, yeah, you see a block, you see a steal. It makes you think that he's come further than I still think that he has, but it's in him without a doubt. But yeah, David, the Pelicans, when you look up and down the roster, outside of Larry, I don't know who Willie honestly trusts as a big. There really isn't a guy, right? That was the reason why Jonas didn't play. So this offseason, you're going to have to find not just one, but at least I think two centers, two bigs that you can rely on, probably one for a starter. Like I said, I think it's 50-50 whether Jonas comes back. I don't think either one of us expect for Jackson Hayes to come back. We just touched on Billy. So there's two openings right there. And we've always said, who's the backup to Zion, right? We've never really seen Zion Williamson have a legitimate backup. So when he's out, you've got somebody that can still get you, 7-8 rebounds, do a little bit more ball handling than, say, your typical center, guy that plays a 5, like, say, a Larry Nance. They've never had that guy. So I would like to see them find somebody like that too.
Yeah,
we should probably talk about that in an article or something as well.
Yeah, I think Trey's going to have to play some small ball 4. He's going to have to eventually in his career. As he gains weight, he's going, like you said, he has to gain weight and strength. But at his height, he's growing into that 6'9", 6'10" area. He could end up that long. And with the way the Pelicans roster is, he's going to, at some nights, especially with them wanting to play Zion at the 5 occasionally, and you want to keep Herb, Trey, BI on the floor at the same time with Zion and CJ or Jose or whomever is at your point guard spot, then that means Trey sometimes is going to have to play for 5 or 6 minutes a night. He's going to have to play that 4 spot, which means he's going to have to rebound, and he's going to have to be able to block a few shots and play around the rim occasionally.
You got to be strong enough to box out. You know what? Jaren Jackson, I saw him struggle against him in one-on-one matchups. You even talk about, say, the Jimmy Butlers of the world, the Kawhi Leonards, right? A lot of guys that usually were small forwards who have played a lot more power forward in the last couple of seasons. So he's got to get as strong to where he can handle those type of, guys, whether it's keeping them off the glass, staying in front of them, not get pushed over, right? Not get pushed out of the way on drives by those guys.
Yep. I think that, we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully we'll get some updates on the coaching search as we get deeper into the season, and we are getting nearer and nearer to the lottery, Ollie. Getting near and near.
I know. I mean, the Pelicans don't have really good odds, right? Was it 0.5% chance of grabbing a number 1 pick overall? Was it, I think, 2.6-ish% to get in the top 4? So really, it's like a 1 in 50 chance. All right, you're not expecting much there, but hey, maybe it could happen.
And at the very least, it starts giving us an idea of what teams the Pelicans may be able to maneuver with if they're looking to trade for a veteran or to move up or back in the draft, which could be their desire depending on where they're sitting.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing, right? Who wins the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes? Because I've been saying this ad nauseum, but what if a team like Detroit Pistons get him? They've got Jaren Duran, Wiseman.
What if Orlando wins it again?
And I'm forgetting.
What if Orlando won it again? He can't. I mean, like, you just got Paolo Banchero, and you're going to add. It's just so much for them.
And they've got Jonathan Isaac, who they're still trying to get in, right? What about Charlotte, who has Mark Williams? I mean, there's a lot of teams. Jabari Smith with Houston. Do you want to really keep him at the 4 for his career when he probably should play more 5, right? So yeah, it'll be an interesting set of dominoes that fall once that lottery gets established.
Folks, I think that's going to do it for us for tonight. Continue, please. Again, you can follow us at thebirdwrites.com and the Bird Calls wherever you get your podcast, and right here on YouTube. Ollie, any final thoughts as we get out?
Not really. I think we're good. We laughed about the playoffs earlier, so we're not going to talk about that.
Oh, no, we're not going to mess with the playoffs. So, folks, thank you.
The Knicks did end up winning, though. That's the thing I wanted to say to you. They held on. So, okay.
They delayed their pain for another day. They're not going to win that series. No way.
The Warriors are jumping all over the Lakers.
Please, Golden State, please extend this series. Please. Just make it go a little bit longer. At the very least, to make it better for Denver. At the very least, just make it easier, a little bit easier for Denver, because the more tired the Lakers are when they got to go up to Denver, the better. Yeah,
let's just tell people what we want to see. We want to see Denver versus Philly, right? Jokic versus Embiid. I want to see it.
I'd love to see 7 games of Jokic versus Embiid. Give me that. Give me that. I think it'd be fantastic.
2 guys that were the forerunners, right? Front runners for the MVP award.
Yes. How could you do better? How could you do better than that if you're the NBA? You get to settle the question, for all intents and purposes at the biggest stage. You find out who the MVP is. Put that thing right in the middle of the.
And when did Philly last win a championship? Was it 82?
1983. It's been 40. This is 50 years, right? So it'll be 40 years. So we're talking about their 4.
And Denver wants their first one. Yeah.
They have the chance to get 40 years later. So until the next time, check us out at the Bird Calls NOLA on Twitter, as well as the Bird Writes as well, at Ollie Cosell and at DM Grubb. We'll talk to y'all soon. This has been the Bird Calls.